Hello, everybody. This is Group 6, and the topic for this week is the flair and focus of successful futurists. These are the learning objectives of our presentation. By the end of this lesson, we have learned to understand how futurists identify and interpret emerging trends by observing signals at the fringe and recognizing early patterns that shape future developments. Secondly, we have learned to analyze the roles of flaring and focusing in strategic forecasting and explain how balancing creativity and logical thinking enhances organizational decision making. And lastly, we have learned to apply the 6-step forecasting methodology to evaluate trends, build scenarios, and develop adaptive strategies that prepare organizations for future change. So, this is my personal learning outcome, understanding the role of futurists. Firstly, I have identified signals and early patterns from the fringe. Futurists are people who observe early signals and patterns that appear at the edges of society, places where new ideas, prototypes, and behaviors first emerge. And they don't just appear randomly, they study these small hints to understand which ones might grow into real trends that shape the future. What stood out to me is that futurists help organize and also help reduce uncertainty. By recognizing changes early, companies can prepare instead of being surprised. So forecasting isn't about guessing. It's about interpreting what's already happening and understanding how it might influence what comes next. Thank you.
So I will be talking about flaring and focusing. First, it's important to differentiate flaring and focusing modes. Flaring is when we open up our thinking and explore widely, while focusing is when we narrow things down and analyze more carefully. During flaring, we use big picture idea generation. This is the moment to brainstorm freely, think creatively, and allow as many possibilities as possible without judging them. Then we shift into focusing, where we apply vetting and analysis. Here we evaluate which ideas are realistic, which have potential, and which ones should be filtered out. By alternating between these two modes, we get the best of both creativity and critical thinking. This balance helps us avoid narrow thinking and ultimately improves how accurately we can forecast or make decisions. So overall, flare to explore, focus to refine, and use both to think more clearly.
So this is the 6-step forecasting method. First, I start by observing the fringe, meaning I look at early signals, behaviors, or ideas that haven't gone mainstream yet. These raw insights help me see what might be emerging. Second, I spot patterns using the cipher categories, which helps me organize and make sense of those signals. Then, I ask critical questions to validate whether these patterns are actually forming into real trends. Finally, I calculate the timing by considering both internal and external forces so I can understand when the trend is likely to take off.
And my key learning outcomes for this session are 3 main points. First, I want a practical understanding of how creative and logical thinkers interact, how their differences can create friction, but also how they can strengthen ideas when used well. Second, I hope to identify real actionable strategies to balance these styles so they drive innovation instead of slowing the team down. I want tools I can directly apply in discussions, decision making, and problem solving. And finally, I want to get better at recognizing these dynamics within my own team so I can guide collaboration more effectively, especially when we're forecasting or planning. Overall, my goal is to walk away with clear ways to harness this duality and turn it into a practical advantage.
So hello everyone, I'm Suhanika and I'm going to be talking about my learning outcome. So the one thing I learned is how to develop different types of future which are probable, plausible, and possible. This helped me understand that future isn't fixed and it's a range of outcomes we can prepare for. I also learned how to score scenarios to judge how likely they are. This makes planning more realistic instead of just guessing. Another thing I learned is how important it is to create strategies that match each scenario so that we aren't caught off guard if things change. And lastly, I also learned that scenario building requires a balance of emotional and analytical thinking. We need to be imaginative, which helps create the future, but we also need to be logical so that we can evaluate the situations. And both of this combined make our strategy so much more stronger. that is what I learned. Thank you.
For my part, I'll be explaining the testing and adapting strategies. To stay ahead, our strategies can't be set in stone. We need to test and adapt them constantly. And here is how. First, check if our actions are actually working and are the right ones. Then ask, does this strategy make us uniquely valuable to our customers? We need also to stay flexible. If something isn't working, we can change the course quickly. And finally, keep everyone focused and watch the market closely for new trends. In short, we test, we adapt, and we stay agile. This is how we win.